this is what I do. Well, maybe this is this will help me get to it. What I find with my audience is my job is to paint the or my job is to provide the canvas, let's say, with a prompt. And sometimes the prompt is supposed to be something that on the surface people go, absolutely not. What the fuck is this guy doing? And then, type, whatever. And I found that the context is always hidden in my comment section because I've been able to bring people in and open up a dialogue, even if it feels abrasive up front. We can typically dig through whatever the topic is in my comment section with people. Not necessarily that you all agree and kumbaya at the end of it, but it provides a space for people to come in and paint with their own stuff. Now, sometimes people are obviously coming in and painting with their own fears, insecurities, lacks, biases. Their opinions about me shift how they respond to me, where if I was somebody else, the response wouldn't be the same on my post. And so I think I just try to provide a space for people to confront themselves, I think. And from the messages that I get based on the things I post, I would say that's a common theme in my content is a place for people to come confront pieces of themselves in my comment section. So here's one. I knew we'd get here. I posted last week about I've never met a secure man who enjoys being called daddy by women, and flooded. There was a lot of opinions around it. And where I don't find that blanket statement is perfect for everybody, I have found a trend of men who have different proclivities, let's say. I've found a correlation between men who are deeply unsettled with themselves. And so because I find a truth, presenting the truth as what I understand it to be, nobody cares, nobody likes, nobody comments, nobody's interested in what I genuinely believe about it. But if I can isolate a piece of it and turn the intensity level up a little bit and post that starts the conversation going. So I had a friend of mine who went, I'm not quite sure if I'm insecure, but my wife and I enjoy doing this. And I said, well, what do you think? Genuinely, what do you think about your level of security in yourself? And he goes, I'm pretty sure, but I don't know specifically. I just know it feels good in my body when this happens. And that's what I'm going off of so far. I said, look, my job and what I believe my job is here is to have you ask yourself the question. It's not to answer it for you. Now, the post itself may be posting an opinion of mine that I hold most of the time, but it's not to force the opinion onto you. It's to make you go, well, I don't agree with that. Okay, why don't I agree with that? Okay, why does it not feel right? And kind of move yourself down that mental path. And then he and I end up having a good, 20 messages back and forth about it and kind of digging through what he was thinking and feeling.
And it's really about asking the right questions and getting curious and leaning in. You're really, like you said, helping people confront themselves and their beliefs and their thoughts, which is kind of the foundation cornerstone of personal growth in a lot of ways.
I think so. I just think it's a different approach. I came into the online coaching space with the rah motivational people. And, I was like, the events are cool. The music's cute. But I see people suffering outside of these events, or the coach who just tells you, whoopee, great job all the time. Also the same with the coaches who just tell you you're terrible and you're a piece of shit and you're a failure to your family and society and blah, blah, blah. And you need to just man up. I found problems with both those areas, and I have just been trying to figure out in the last 8 or 9 years, what's the middle ground where people can feel propelled to achieve something better than where they currently are, and also understand where the value of not feeling content with where you currently are, and how do I have that kind of push-pull and create that internally for people.
I definitely think that that's a way to do it. It's just observation, it's awareness, it's critical thinking. It's not necessarily a pushing somebody into something or pulling them into something. It's just like hey, let's meet where you're at, and is that serving you? Is this actually what you want to believe? Do you know why you think that? Do you all of those are that's I'm seeing as you're coming from, and that's really amazing. How have you seen that impact your coaching as it relates to masculine, feminine work and supporting men? Because I know that that's something you've dove into. I'd like to talk more about that.
I didn't hear the question. How have I what serving men?
How have you gotten in, like, used this frame of personal development into your work with supporting men in their masculinity?
Yeah, I find that most men that come to me come from kind of one of these two paths. It's either let's take an opinion that I have. An opinion that I have either makes him angry, frustrated, whatever, and I disagree with this and I need to let him hear about it, or this makes me feel bad and I'm not sure why I feel bad because I believe this person's a good person. Kyree's a good person, but something he said made me not feel great about myself. And why is that? And what do I need to confront within that? And my job then is to not be a brick wall when they come to me, whether it's with an argument or with a pain or with whatever. I get to just open up the conversation. And because people can see that I'm not just some angry guy posting mean things on online, I post how much I'm in love with my wife. I post my children. I post my friend group. I post the people that are close to me. And I think it ingratiates people a lot to come in and feel safe to paint on that canvas that I provided. And so I think I try to cover topics that I know men are dealing with, that I hear from clients, that I hear from friends of mine, that I hear just from around my peer group. And I try to cover topics that are important to us and help people navigate them as I've learned to navigate them myself. We've talked about this before. I've done over 1,000 interviews of other people. I just have so many data points on why we become who we become. And I help people walk that path with themselves.
So why do you feel we're at, I'm just genuinely curious, in your perspective, why do you feel we're at where we're at when it comes to society and in relationships and masculine and feminine energy? I know you talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but I'd like to dive into that of like, how did we end up here in so much divide and like for the majority of people?
Yeah. I think it's pain. From what I understand so far, it's pain. And it's not just our pain, it's our parents and our grandparents' pain as well. I think, the feminism and femininity movements have kind of been sparked by shitty old men. And I think it's not feeling safe. It's not feeling emboldened. It's not feeling safe to be in your feminine as women, and having it literally not being a safe place, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think it's a lot of women having seen their mothers and their grandmothers going through something like that. And I think what it happens is, naturally, when I get bit by an animal, I'm going to retract. I'm going to move back. And I'm going to safeguard myself. I'm going to say, I'm going to put a barrier between me and this other thing. And I think what's happened is, instead of putting a barrier between themselves and terrible men, they've put a barrier between their feminine and somebody else's masculine. And so what happens there is, because that polarity still needs to exist, a lot of people have embodied that polarity within themselves and not allowed it on the outside, because I can't trust it on the outside of me. And I think it's the same for a lot of men. I think a lot of men have been scorned by their single mother who hated their father. And even if rightly so, she left him, or not, maybe didn't leave him, but hated him secretly. That's what I realized when I was growing up. My parents were divorced when I was 2 months old, so I didn't have mom and dad at home. So I did have a single mother who hated my father. But what I saw when I moved to a more like middle to upper class area was a lot of mothers hated the father and still lived in the same household. And I saw the level of dysfunction there. So I think it's learned from your own pain, and I think it's learned from ancestral pain as well. That is just putting up a roadblock. I don't trust this outside of me, so I'm going to embody it inside of me and believe that polarity belongs inside. I believe that polarity belongs between me and another person. And I think we've run away from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what do you feel are the obstacles to overcome to actually start to build that dynamic between us and another and build that polarity again? But then also, what do you see are the solutions here?
I think it's everybody. Well, one, we see the solutions already happening. My wife and I are a solution. A lot of happy couples I know are a solution. I think it's overcoming the fear that I'm going to run into this again. That's what everybody's afraid of. If you were guaranteed, hey, if you opened up your heart, you're going to find the perfect person for you on the first try. If that was the case, everybody would step back out. Everybody would go take the quote unquote risk. But as we know, in relationships, in business and entrepreneurship, there is no reward without the risk. And I think everybody's waiting for the perfect opportunity. I think everybody's waiting until the fear is gone to jump out into the middle of this. And I think the solution is in looking at the people who jumped anyway and became the right person for the right person. So I think there's a lot of avoidance in this, especially when you did have, let's say, a perpetrator, when you did have somebody that you can point at and say, no, they're the reason, like they're the cause for my pain. What we do on accident is say that that's the entire reason I haven't found what I'm looking for. And part of the reason is always I'm responsible for what I create. And so I'm afraid of, I think I see this way more with men than with women. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist with women. I do believe that this is just shaped by my own experiences. I work with a lot of young men. And I think a lot of the answer is I don't trust myself to create the right dynamic for myself with a woman. I don't trust myself not to screw it up. So why would I start?
That's a big one. And where do you find supports that self-trust?
So I'm big on identity. I was just writing and sending off to a friend of mine, kind of an executive spreadsheet. I'm starting to work with small to mid-sized companies on their executives' identities. I think that's where it all starts. And my identity is made up of a collection of stories that I've told myself so far about my life, about the people around me, about my belief systems, about my behaviors, about other people's behaviors, about my parents, my grandparents, society and what they've done to me, technology, the current state of dating, all these topics. We are full of stories about them that we've told ourselves, that we have embodied, that we've believed. And I think it's helping people shift some of those stories to be more helpful. There's, you think about twin studies, and they can study people in the same exact environment, born on the same day, within minutes of each other, same parents, same everything, who have wildly different experiences. Or you take in court cases, eyewitness testimony. Why it's insanely non-believable is because two people can look at the same exact thing and get something totally separate from it. And I think we can do that for ourselves. Something that is a negative story in my head, I can find something else within it. Not that it has to be positive. I can find what I was supposed to get from it and use that to propel me forward. And now it's no longer a negative story. It's a learning story. And I think it's finding where those pivot points are in our own life experiences up to this point, and then also how we view our future, and start shifting those stories we're telling ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely more empowering that way moving into the future. And there's an opening to be able to trust yourself to create something. And it's certainly been true in my life.
Yeah.
I know you said you work with a lot of young men. I mean,
Yeah.
and you've had a lot of data points on human behavior. What are some of the patterns you're seeing beyond this, like not trusting myself to create the dynamic when it comes to relationships? And I guess specifically after that, like, what are the opportunities you see that women can show up in a certain way to support men showing up more? Because that's a conversation that I've been having a lot of. A desire for men to show up and lead. And yeah, I'm just curious your take on that.
So this is it. And this is a hard one. Because there's obviously boundaries around this. What I'll say, and then try to qualify as well as I can, even though it's going to sound a certain way to some people. I think he has to have space to be messy with encouragement to clean it up. I think men need to feel manly sometimes. And I think because of what's happened so often and how much pain there is around just men taking advantage of being bigger, stronger, faster, whatever, we have a lot of women who don't want any of that. Anything that looks aggressive, anything that looks too powerful, I'm not comfortable with and I don't feel safe with. And so I think it's the ability, and I don't know exactly how it comes about for everybody, but I think it's the ability to recognize and encourage that in him and encourage the container around it. I tell guys a lot that There needs to be some sort of outlet that is not at home for this. Whatever it is, if it's fighting, if it's Muay Thai, if it's jujitsu, if it's just letting off steam. So for myself, I live a on the surface stress-free lifestyle, but I also carry around other people's stuff with me a lot. I coach a lot. And I consult for large businesses for their marketing. So I'm carrying around stresses of other people, and I'm managing a wife and kids, and I'm managing a network of people that I'm getting to know better and getting invited into new territories with people that I'm now around. But I'm always carrying other people's stories around with me. I have to have some sort of outlet. And for me, I love cigars and I like playing poker. So what I do with those, because those to too much of an extent, people love to drink at my cigar lounge. I don't drink very often, but people love it. And if that is your escape, you can dive into it too harshly. And that's where alcoholism starts to come in. And that's where alcohol abuse comes in. And that's where it starts leaking back into the home. Same thing with gambling. I enjoy playing poker. I play the same poker game every Wednesday with the same group of guys, and we enjoy it. I don't let that turn into I go to the casino multiple days a week and I go gamble off, our mortgage every month and hope that I win it back. It all exists within a container. On Wednesdays, every single Wednesday pretty much, I go up to Scottsdale, Arizona. I work for my cigar lounge. I usually get a haircut. I work for my cigar lounge. I do my meetings, Zoom calls, in-person meetings. I go play poker with the old guys in Scottsdale, and I get home very, very late, 3, 4 a.m. And that is the one day that I have that outlet for. I don't have to be responsible for anybody else right now. My wife and kids are happily home asleep with the alarm on and the dogs watching the door. I can feel away from the regular stressors of everything else that are going on. And it has to exist within a container. And so that's where I say, allow him to be messy to some extent, obviously with a boundary around it, and encourage him to have it cleaned up, which means putting that container around whatever that is. But I think it's not stifling this thing that actually makes us better partners in service to a safety that also strips us of our masculinity.
I absolutely love that. And as a guy, I can totally relate and be like, yeah, you need to have that offload time where you're not responsible for anything. Because I think a lot of men carry a lot of responsibility, no matter what stage in life they're in. And to just be able to put that down and be in their wild essence and be messy a little bit, again, with boundaries, that's really healthy. And then that'll allow the space to show up more for the women. I can just hear some ladies being like, how is that beneficial? What would you say to that? Like, like what, because maybe they just don't get it because they're not men, but like, why does he need that?
Yeah.
And how can I trust that will lead to him like showing up more for me and leading me? Could you speak more to how that actually works?
They're not going to like the answer. Yeah, this answer isn't a comfy one. It's not for you. My wife goes to book club. I don't get it. My wife likes to read romance novels, and she did a smut Pilates class led by one of the women in her book club last week. I don't fucking get it. Also, it works for her, so I don't care. And I love it, actually. I love that she wants to go do that. I love that she has that container for herself. I don't need to understand it in order to value it, in order to say, yes, please, absolutely go do this. This is, if you need it, if you tell me you need it and that you want it, I want that for you as well. End of story. I don't have to understand why that's important to you. And that's, I think, really hard for a lot of people because we want to understand the why. What that actually is, oftentimes, is trying to intellectualize the discomfort I feel. Instead of just saying, I feel uncomfortable. Why in me do I feel uncomfortable with this when on the surface there's nothing wrong with it? Do I think they're going to do something immoral? Do I think they're going to do something wrong or that's against the value system that we've set up between one another? And typically that's the actual question that we should be asking. But what we do oftentimes as men and women, we push that insecurity onto our partner and say, you need to answer my question as to why I feel discomfort in this, as opposed to saying, what does that do for you? I would love to hear like how that works for you. And my wife had these questions when I first started, because if I'm playing poker and I'm smoking cigars, are you inhaling them? Are they going into your lungs? And then with, gambling, are you like, how much are you gambling? Are we going to be put into a financial situation that's not okay because of your gambling? And so I think there are valid questions, but there are ways to pose the questions with curiosity, genuine curiosity, not pretend curiosity either, in a way that actually encourages your partner to open up and share why they enjoy this. If one of my friends was ridiculed quite a bit by his wife by going to Muay Thai, and she was like, "What are you training for? Like, are you going to fight people? Are you going to start being aggressive toward other people?" And he's like, "No, this is actually so I'm not aggressive toward anybody else. I haven't been aggressive toward you, but I have felt aggression toward people when things aren't going well, and I don't like that about myself. And so I need to go find an outlet for it. I need to find a safe outlet for it." And was continually like ridiculed for it, to the point where he had his wife come talk to me about it and was like, I don't fucking understand. And part of my answer was the same. It's not for you to understand. But can you see what happens when he's actively attempting to clean up the messy? He feels the messy in here. And before it manifests itself externally, he's saying it needs to be put somewhere. I'm not going to put it in my home, so I'm going to put it over here instead. And maybe it's while I clean it up. Maybe it's while I fix it. Maybe it's while I understand why I feel this level of aggression. Maybe I'm working on this as I'm having an outlet for it. And I think that's just a difficult thing to accept sometimes, and try to find out where it's helpful for him, not from your perspective, but from his perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's definitely the real stuff right there. And I'm curious too. I mean, it was just rolling in my head because, women have their own thing like that, like you said, book club and other things. And I'm curious what your viewpoint on this is like, because for men, we're like offloading things, and we're not going to put this here. We're putting it here. We're expressing the aggression in this way, not in the home. And for women, I think it's like they're almost like receiving from each other in those energies to like recharge in some way. And for men, we're like discharging. I think, is that accurate in your opinion, or what would you say there?
I think so. And this is always something I've gotten in trouble for talking about with spirituality and just the spiritual community, is that I do believe women grow by receiving and men grow by producing. And I've had to have multiple conversations with male clients of mine around the prayer circles and the yoga exercises, and not that any of these are bad in isolation. It's that when this is your only way of relieving your own stress and tension, what you're accidentally doing is containing a fire that will eventually be put out. And I don't want to say, this is what I'm trying to avoid right now, is the political conservative guy going, the feminization of men. I don't think that femininity inside of a man is a negative thing. I think whenever we pray, we're being feminine. I'm receiving something from what I call God, what you may call source, universe, whatever. I'm being feminine in that moment. There are times with my wife when I'm receiving her download from the day, whatever happened with the kids, whatever's going on. When I'm listening, when I'm receiving, I'm being feminine. That's fine. And when my outlet, and my only outlet that I allow myself to have for what I feel in here, is in a feminine space, that becomes stifling for a masculine fire that I believe is imperative for us. And I find it to be a detriment to a lot of people that I love and that I value, when the only outlet they feel like they have is Bali, Tulum, Thailand, the yoga retreats, the Reiki sessions, the ayahuasca. I don't find those in isolation to be negative things. I find when that becomes the only way you process, it becomes unhealthy at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. I can totally agree with that. And what would you say are some of the ways in which that fire could be flamed, so to speak, to deal with these things in a masculine way? What does that look like?
Be healthfully aggressive somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not that like the aggression goes away. It's oftentimes, and what I found by actually having conversations with these men, is that it's turned inward. Yeah.
And that's like that aggression is what women are looking for, because that's actually the leadership. It's not like aggression turned towards them. It's just that energy in and of itself produces the man to show up But when you're demonizing that aggression because, like you said, mom experienced it, or I saw my grandparents experience that, and that's not okay, whatever, that fire dies down, and then he's not going to show up and lead.
Or it blows up eventually. This is what happens to a lot of people, is it's stifled so often that it explodes, masculine and feminine. If you've stifled your femininity for long enough, guaranteed something's going to have to rupture. It can't be contained. And sometimes it's decades down the road. And I think that's the biggest detriment, is when you have responsibilities piled on top of your pain. When your pain explodes, your responsibilities get disrupted. And that's, I think, the big thing I'm trying to save people from, or help people save themselves from. I'm not saving anybody from anything. What I want people to save themselves from is disrupting what they're attempting to build.
And what advice would you have for the ladies then on, I don't know, what would or even just what would you say to them to support this with the men in their life to be more aggressive? Because again, they're going through the hurdles of, that's a, the judgment they have on the aggression itself.
Yeah. If you feel safe with the person, your judgment should become curiosity. I don't understand the kink community, and I have friends who are in it, and I'm wildly curious. I don't need to accept it for myself. I don't need to adopt any of it for myself. But I'm actually wildly curious. That started off as judgment. I was very judgmental at first, and to some extent of it, I still am. And around those things, when I identify them, I go ask my friends who are in it. It's not so I can make fun. It's not, and these people have to feel safe with me to receive my curiosity. This is why I think safety is paramount in a masculine feminine dynamic, is if I don't feel safe with you, I'm not coming over there. I'm not stepping forward. I was just talking, funny enough, I was talking to an Uber driver yesterday about this. Our car was in the shop, and after the kids went to bed, I went to go pick up our car, and I had to Uber over there. And he's just asking, he asked if I watched the debates, which I said no. And we kind of got into, luckily, like a mild form of a political conversation, because I'm not interested in the charged political conversation. But we were talking about why there's so much disconnect between the right and the left, let's say politically in America. And I do find a lot of similarities between the masculine and feminine. And I was actually thinking about it as I was talking. I was like, oh, this is men and women also. Everybody is afraid. We're here. Everybody's afraid. If I take a step forward and you don't, now I lost. If I take a step forward and you don't, now I lost. And because I'm so afraid of you not reciprocating my energy toward coming to the middle or meeting somewhere congruently, I'm not willing to take that step. Because if I take the step and you choose not to, now I have lost my power, and you now have power over me, and I don't trust you with power over me. I think there has to be a mutual coming together, and there has to be an understanding, and again, a safety in, if I take a step forward, you're going to also, or else we're just going to continually dance around in a circle with nobody moving closer to the center, nobody moving closer to one another, nobody moving closer to connectiveness. I have to find somebody who's willing to do that with me. And if I'm with somebody who's not willing to do that with me, I have to be willing to heavily challenge that. First, confirm for myself that that's a non-negotiable. I have to have this inside of a romantic relationship or even a friendship that I have. And then I have to make that an express requirement for me. And if that's not available, I have to be willing to sever a tie.
And by moving to the middle, are you talking about, vulnerability? Are you talking, like, what does that look like to you in your life?
Yeah, I would look at it as connection. I can't be connected to you if I'm not attempting to understand you.
That's very true.
But I can't attempt to understand you until I feel safe with you, which is why I think that's first.
Yeah, most definitely. It's very interesting, the parallel there with
it's the rawest version of this. If I put my hand forward, is this dog going to bite me or not? Is this cat going to scratch me or not?
It's interesting, the parallel there with the political stuff and then the masculine feminine as well. It's interesting. What else are you seeing? Because again, you, like you said, you had so many data points and people that you've interviewed on just human behavior. But what else are you seeing when it comes to the collective around masculine, feminine that a lot of people have blind spots for, whether it's men or women, and they don't realize that they're putting out their fire. What are other ways that that's happening?
That men and women are putting out their own fires?
Sorry, I think we got a little bit of a lag. You there? Are we back?
Yeah. I think I understood the question. You're saying in what way are men and women putting out their, like, stifling their own fires?
What other ways is that happening? Yeah.
All right. I think we're good now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay. The question was, in what way are men and women, like, stifling their own fires?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man, we got a huge lag, I think. Are we back?
I think so.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I just want to double check. I'll edit this in post.
I think we're back to normal.
All right, cool. Yes, that was the question. Is in what other ways are men and women stifling their inner fires?
Yeah, can you ask the question again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a fear of the consequences of expressing myself in a certain way. I'll also say that there's an overcorrection to this as well. People overexpressing to the point where it just becomes a dopamine addiction to expression, to self-expression, or to people's responses to your self-expression. But I think people stifle themselves by not exploring their thoughts, their feelings, their belief systems, their identity. Not exploring their identity, I think, is massive, because then you default to what's expected of you. And I think that is massively stifling. What I find also harmful is, usually it's as a result of not being able to express yourself. There's an overexpression where that fire, you become irresponsible with the fire. The fire is extended to every piece of your being, to your interactions, and it's never inside of a container. And some people love that. And what I call that is an addiction. There's an addiction to the thrill of self-expression and people championing me for it, to the point where I don't know how to come back home, to come back to center. And so I see a lot of people, especially younger people, reveling in the wildfire of themselves, and then they find each other and they do this with one another. And I think that creates a whole lot of toxicity when that is not only not contained, but then it's shared among groups of people. And I see this having a lot of long-lasting effects for people our age. I talk with friends about this. When I see them going off into the woods to do dance parties too often, again, I think these things are just fine. And when it becomes all you ever want to do is the next rave, it's the next Coachella, it's the next festival, it's the next thing, I think what I find is most of those people are running away from home, and here home, not physical home. And we always get to have a good conversation about it. When I'm friends with somebody, or if I have a client who happens to be doing this, we get to have a healthy conversation around what are we sometimes running away from in service of let my fire spread.
It's a really good perspective and way to look at it all, with that fire kind of just like being like a wildfire and uncontrollable, kind of just spewing it everywhere. And I've never thought about it that way.
It's a trauma response. It's just like any other trauma response. We're going to take this thing that I felt stifled with, and I'm going to take it too far, because fuck you for hurting me. That's what we come to for a lot of people.
Yeah, man.
Aimed at parents, aimed at an ex. Think about when a lot of people, like when this happens for a lot of people, it's after a breakup. It's after some sort of identity shift where your parents or your peer group don't understand you. I call it running off into the woods together. And I have friends do it quite often, especially right after breakups. What the answer sometimes is for those people is, and there's not healthy versions of this, that there aren't healthy ways of approaching this. But a lot of times, if we're honest with ourselves, it's screw you for hurting me. And that deserves to be processed, not run away from.
Right. And in that way, that's the healthy aggression outlets and the connection, no matter whether you're masculine, feminine, is what you're saying, and how to actually process those things instead of going into like just the share circles and just the raves. I've seen that same thing, man.
And I think those are great.
I see what you're
saying. I like that for people. Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, where we go from here, because it really feels like the answer to a lot of this masculine feminine dynamic stuff is like tending to your own inner fire, not letting it go awry, but also not letting it die out, and doing that in a way that's natural to your proclivity as masculine or feminine, in your essence,
It's
and
also
also
making the other
supporting your
person
partner in
aware
doing
of it.
that.
I think that's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Yeah,
Say more
yeah.
on that.
It's making the other person aware of it, and it's choosing to co-create what we need with what my partner needs. And I think that that's, again, it's scary. If I judge them for what they're doing, they may also judge me. So neither one of us are going to share. Neither one of us are going to open up. Neither one of us are going to clue the other person into who we actually are when we're sitting alone in silence with ourselves. I want you to understand that about me. I want my wife to know who I am when she's not around. I want her to know, I want her to know my core so that she can learn to be attentive to my core, or if I'm ignoring my core, or if I'm allowing that fire to lap over the edges too much. I think that's part of what we get to share with one another is the ability to self-regulate, but then also help our partner regulate. But I have to first, again, I have to first understand you, but I have to first understand myself before I can even attempt to understand you. Because otherwise, my view of you and what you need is going to be shaped by my own fears. I won't allow you to go out and travel. I know guys who can't go travel because she has this insane fear of infidelity. And if I haven't had those conversations with you, if we haven't been able to feel safe with one another and our desires and just everything around, like what would create intimacy for a couple, that's always just going to be there. And so I think a lot of it is communicating, like who here's who I actually am. And we're just deathly afraid of that because we fear other people being irresponsible with it.
And a little bit of a selfish question, although I feel like other people may want to know this. On part of this podcast, I interview couples, but I'd love to know, when did you know your wife was the one, and how?
Very quickly. I would actually say Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day of 2020. It was my second time. She was living in Austin, Texas at the time, and I live here in Arizona. And I'd gone out there once in January. First time I ever met her. And we weren't like dating exclusively yet, but there was obviously an interest. And then I went back for Valentine's Day, and we stayed up till 4 a.m. Actually, her roommate at the time, who was her best friend and roommate at the time, had just gone through a breakup. And so we were going to go to some nice fancy steak dinner. And it was my idea to try to include her roommate. And I said, why don't I just come over and cook for you guys? I'll fly in, go to the grocery store, and I'll cook like steak and lobster for you guys. We ended up taking mushrooms. Great time. Her roommate, as I was cooking dinner, ended up going upstairs and crying most of the night, unfortunately. But we ended up, we kind of felt that. We ended up having a really great time. She ended up coming down and like watching a movie with us and hanging out and having a good conversation about that, her last relationship. But yeah, we stayed up. Food wasn't ready until like 1 a.m. just because we were having a great time. But we ate with our hands, steak and lobster on the couch, watching a movie, and then stayed up till probably 4 a.m. just talking and connecting and sharing our hearts with each other. And I think both of us knew that night. We didn't officially become boyfriend and girlfriend until 2 or 3 weeks later. But it was like a mutual understanding. And I think she actually had texted me on the way to the airport the next morning. Was like, is this what I thought it was last night? And we're both absolutely on the same page that it was shared in magnitude, right? We both felt like the same weight of what had just happened the night before. And so I think that was the answer for both of us.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
And what do you feel led for you as a man to be in a space to be a match for her?
I had learned safety for sure. My ex had borderline personality disorder and was bipolar. And I learned how to be patient and understanding and hold space in an extreme. Like if I'm getting yelled and cussed at, just being able to be the stable calm. It also helped me a lot for my clients. Like be the stable calm in situations where I would very understandably not be. And I think that level of safety was something she had never experienced before. It was confronting actually for her as well. I remember there was when we first started like dating, she was going out with her friends and sent me a picture of what she was wearing. Looked great. And so I go, "You look amazing. Have a great night. Just let me know when you get home." And she says, "Okay, not a problem, whatever." And then we FaceTime the next morning. She's a little grumpy. I didn't understand why. And so I ask her, "Something's wrong." Like, very short responses to my questions, or "How was your night last night?" It was very short answer. And she goes, "You didn't even text me last night." I was like, "You said you were having fun with your friends. I wanted you to have fun. I don't need to continually check in on you." And then she's like, you just said I looked good with what I was wearing, like nothing else." I said, what did you want me to say? I just kind of knew that something was coming. I was like, "What would you have liked me to say?" She's like, "Honestly, I wanted you to be concerned a little bit. I wanted you to say something about, make sure guys don't try to flirt with you or something like that." I was like, "Oh my, that didn't even cross my mind." And she was like, "Well, I kind of wanted you to be a little bit jealous, like just to know that like you cared." And I said, here's the thing. You and I both know what we have in one another. But because I also value myself, and I don't only value you above me, because I also value myself, you would be missing out if you went and did something like that. Oh my gosh. Like I'm still going to find what I'm supposed to have. I'm still going to find the wife and mother of my kids. You're going to have missed out if you were to do something crazy. So I don't have to worry about that because I've already checked in with myself before you went out with your friends and said, do I trust what I believe we have, even though it wasn't fully expressed at that time? Do I trust what I believe we have, and that we both kind of see this as the same thing and see each other as, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for? If the answer to that is yes, I have no need to be jealous. I have no need to be worried about what random guy on 6th Street in Austin, Texas is going to say to you that pulls you away from me. And if he was capable of that, it's not mine. I trust God to give me what's mine and to take away what's not. And I think I've embodied that. We can say too much, but so much that I'm okay with that happening. And what we ended up getting to was that this was a trauma response from a previous relationship, where him feeling jealous about her around other men is what let her know that he still cared, and that he would pull away his care from her as a weapon, and that his love and affection would be restricted as a weapon, and that it was confronting seeing somebody who wasn't actively doing that, and that at first looked like, this guy must not care about me.
Huge. And I think a lot of people get a lot of value out of that story, for sure, and a lot of confrontation.
Lots of
lots of healing in that. Together. Yeah, well, we do have to wrap up the show, man. But I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your heart, sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, man.
This was a long time coming, and I've been looking forward to having you on the show and get to know you better. So it's an honor.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Likewise. All right, awesome. That's a wrap with that.